Rain lashes against the glass of the towering skyscraper, streaking the windows like scratches across the face of heaven. As Gregory Vance, billionaire CEO of Vance Tech Industries, strides briskly across the polished marble lobby of his corporate headquarters, his $1,000 shoes clicking like gunshots in the silence. Cameras flash outside as his security team parts the small crowd gathered beneath the awning, most of them pleading for jobs, help, or just mercy, but he's deaf to them all. His eyes locked ahead, jaw clenched like steel until an old hunched figure suddenly steps in his path. "Please," she whispers, soaked in the downpour, her wrinkled hands trembling as she holds out a torn envelope. "Just a moment of your time." Her voice is fragile, almost drowned out by the thunder rumbling overhead. But Gregory halts more from shock than empathy, staring down at the gaunt woman who dares to touch the hem of his tailored trench coat. She is dressed in layers of mismatched sweaters, her gray hair tangled and flattened by rain eyes, dulled by hardship, but not entirely without fire. "Who let this thing in?" Gregory mutters, brushing her off with disgust, glancing at his assistant. "Get her out of here. Call security." The old woman doesn't move. "I asked for help 2 weeks ago." She says louder now, pulling out a folded letter. "Your company seized my property. You promised me a review. I have nowhere left to go." Gregory's nostrils flare. "Lady, I don't run a charity. If you're homeless, that's your own failure, not mine." His voice is loud now, echoing through the lobby, drawing attention from the suited staff and passers-by. "You people always want handouts, as if effort and discipline don't matter. Move before I have you arrested." The security guards approach, but the old woman stands her ground, eyes narrowing. "You don't remember me, do you?" she says softly. "Why should I?" he snaps, impatient. "I'm Eleanor Bright," she says, "widow of Charles Bright. We used to own the building your headquarters sits on." A hush falls. Gregory's face shifts a flicker of recognition, blinking across his eyes before being buried under arrogance. "That's ancient history," he mutters. "Your husband lost the company in the '08 crash. I bought the property fair and square." "You bought it," she replies, "by driving us into debt with falsified contracts. You were a consultant on the board. Then remember, you orchestrated the acquisition, then fired my husband weeks before his stroke." Gregory steps back slightly, his jaw tight. "None of that was illegal," he says, but there's a tremor in his voice now. "Not illegal," Eleanor says, "but immoral. You destroyed my family for profit, and now you can't even look at me without shame." Gasps ripple through the lobby. Someone's recording. Gregory sees it. "Get her out," he barks, red-faced. "Right now," but Eleanor holds up a hand. "Don't touch me. I've waited 15 years to speak to you face to face. You wanted to humiliate me. So let's finish it." She reaches into her soggy coat and pulls out a thick envelope. "This is a deed to this building. Purchased under a trust 6 months ago. Vance Tech's lease is up. Effective today." Silence. Gregory blinks, lips parting slightly. "What are you talking about?" Eleanor smiles, slow and unshaking. "I used what little I had invested it wisely over the years, with help from friends you never saw coming, former employees, whistleblowers, journalists. Together, we formed Bright Horizons Trust. We've been buying up Vance Tech properties, little by little, through shell companies. This building is just the first. And today I've come to collect Gregory." Stares at her like she's grown a second head. He snatches the deed from her hands, eyes scanning it, then glares at his assistant, who, pale-faced, mutters, "She's not lying, sir." Murmurs ripple through the crowd. Someone starts clapping. then more. Then the entire lobby erupts in stunned, amazed applause. "You set me up!" Gregory hisses, veins bulging in his neck. "You wanted this circus." "No," Eleanor says, voice calm and clear, "I wanted justice." She turns toward the security guards, escort him out. He no longer has authority here. One guard hesitates, then looks at the other. Slowly, they step forward, not toward her, but toward Gregory. "Sir," one says with quiet finality, "you need to leave." Cameras, flash phones, record, the image of the billionaire being led out by his own guards. His empire collapsing under the weight of a grandmother's revenge will go viral within hours. As the glass doors close behind him, Eleanor stands tall in the center of the lobby. Rainwater still dripping from her clothes, but her back straight and her gaze unwavering. She turns to the gathered crowd. This building will become a shelter. She announces for women over 50 who have nowhere to go, those who were discarded like I was. They'll find not just safety here, but dignity, purpose, and power. A cheer rises in a nearby cafe. A young man watching the live stream wipes tears from his eyes. "She did it," he whispers. "She really did it." Gregory Vance, once the embodiment of unchecked corporate greed, disappears into the rain as headlines explode across every major outlet. And Eleanor Bright, once dismissed as a relic of the past, stands not as a victim, but as a warrior reclaimed by truth, her legacy reborn. The moral resounds louder than any press release. Never measure a person's worth by their clothes, status, or silence, for behind the quietest voice may lie the storm that rewrites history. Justice, though late, never forgets. But as the sun begins to rise the next morning over a city forever changed by one woman's defiance, Eleanor sits alone on the top floor of the building she now owns again, in the very office that once belonged to Gregory Vance. Her frail hands folded over a photo frame she retrieved from a forgotten drawer. A dusty picture of her and Charles Young, and radiant, standing before the original Bright Enterprises sign, with hope in their eyes and pride in their hearts. A symbol of everything they built from nothing before it was stolen. The sky burns orange beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows as Eleanor breathes in deeply. Her chest tight, not with grief, but with release, the weight of decades finally beginning to lift. But peace is short-lived. Her assistant, a sharp-eyed young woman named Lila, who once lived in a shelter herself, bursts in, holding a trembling phone. "Ma'am, there's a problem," she says. "Vance Tech's shareholders, dozens of them. They're retaliating. Gregory's filing a countersuit. He's calling your trust a front for fraud. They're trying to freeze the accounts. We might lose the shelter funds." Eleanor's face hardens, the fire behind her eyes rekindling as she rises slowly from her chair, gripping the arms of the chair to steady herself, every inch of her body, aching with age, but alive with conviction. "Let them come," she says. "He's clinging to power like a drowning man to a stone, but the tide has already turned." She pulls open a drawer and places a weathered leather journal on the desk. This was Charles's. In it are notes, documents, details of every false deal, every bribe, every coercion Gregory ever committed. He kept it because he believed the truth would matter someday, and that day is today. Lila gasps as she flips through the pages, her fingers trembling as she sees names, bank transfers, meeting times, audio transcripts. This is enough to bring the whole board down. Eleanor nods. "And we won't stop there. We'll expose the evictions, the payoffs, the illegal firings. We'll bring in the workers who suffered in silence." the janitor who lost his arm in an unsafe factory, the engineer who was silenced after uncovering environmental damage, the single mother whose pension was stolen. No more secrets, no more shame. Downstairs, the lobby now bears a new name, the Bright Center for Justice and Renewal. Volunteers move swiftly, painting walls, setting up beds, preparing hot meals. A group of elderly women arrive one by one, each carrying bags full of their remaining belongings, and expressions full of disbelief as they're greeted not with pity, but with respect. Eleanor watches through the glass as one woman drops to her knees and weeps upon seeing a room with her name on it. "They called us useless," she mutters. "But this proves we're not news crews return. But this time not to film a fall, but a rise, a revolution." Eleanor is invited to speak at the City Hall rally that weekend. Her voice, though small, echoes through the streets. Age is not weakness. Poverty is not shame. And kindness is not a liability. We are not burdens. We are pillars. And it's time the world saw us as such. The crowd roars across the city. Gregory Vance watches in a dark conference room, surrounded by lawyers who whisper about irreparable damage, crumbling stock mass resignations. His hands shake as he sees Eleanor's face on every screen once forgotten, now revered. "How did she do it?" he mumbles. "She was just a widow, just an old woman." One of the lawyers replies without looking up. "She had something you never did. Purpose and people." Days later, federal investigators raid Vance Tech's archives. A Senate inquiry is launched. Eleanor testifies, calmly recounting how corruption disguised itself in contracts, how dignity was buried under quarterly reports. She doesn't ask for revenge, only accountability. Her grace stuns the room. Senators rise. Journalists cry. People cheer in every corner of the country, where the powerless have long been ignored. And when Gregory Vance is finally arrested on multiple counts of fraud, conspiracy, and obstruction, it's not handcuffs that defeat him, but the silence in the courtroom when Eleanor walks past him without a word, her head held high, surrounded by the very people he once deemed disposable. In the years that follow, the Bright Foundation expands nationwide, opening centers for displaced women, wrongly terminated workers, and elderly citizens, abandoned by broken systems. Its slogan is simple: "We remember who you are." Eleanor becomes a symbol not of revenge, but of reclamation, not of destruction, but of restoration. And when she finally passes peacefully in her sleep at age 87, the nation mourns not just the loss of a woman, but the end of an era forged by courage. Her funeral is attended by thousands, presidents, janitors, former homeless women now, CEOs, all holding candles. A choir sings softly. Rain falls gently as if the sky itself honors her, and engraved upon her stone beneath a blooming cherry tree are the words, "She had nothing but changed everything." The world finally learns that true wealth is not measured in accounts or shares, but in the lives you lift to the justice you demand, and the dignity you defend even when the world tells you you're too small to matter. Years pass, and the seed Eleanor Bright planted grows into a forest of change. One center becomes 10, then 100 each, built not on concrete, but on conscience rising in forgotten towns and fractured cities, sheltering those once discarded and now empowered. The Bright Foundation evolves into a movement, a symbol stitched into jackets worn on pins, drawn in chalk on sidewalks where children once slept. Now laughing in safe spaces Eleanor imagined but never lived to see. But her presence lingers on every wall bearing her name. in every reclaimed building, and most vividly in the lives of the women who now carry her mission forward, led by Lila, who rises from assistant to executive director, a survivor turned architect of hope. Under her leadership, the foundation introduces the Bright Fellowship, offering grants and leadership training to elderly women seeking to rebuild their lives, and a documentary titled The Woman Who Brought Down a Giant sweeps international film festivals, narrated by the very Senator Eleanor, once silenced with poise, who now calls her the soul of the century. But as the foundation expands globally, a hidden threat begins to stir not in the boardrooms of dying corporations, but within the system itself, in the shadows of politics, where new figures attempt to discredit the movement by painting it as radical, destabilizing, unpatriotic. A rising political star named Clayton Marsh, with slicked back hair and a poisonous tongue disguised as charm, begins his campaign for Senate with a chilling message. We must return to order, to tradition, to a time before angry old women rewrote the rules. The media snaps to attention. Talk shows erupt. Headlines twist legacy into controversy. Marsh proposes a bill, the Corporate Stability Act, designed to restrict nonprofits from acquiring commercial real estate. Critical to economic growth, a direct attack on the Bright Foundation's methods. Leela watches this unfold from her office, her jaw clenched. Eleanor's journal open beside her like a moral compass. They think they can erase her, she whispers, but Eleanor never built this for herself. She built it so we'd be ready. And they are. Across the country, women begin to organize, not with violence but with voices flooding town halls, writing letters holding up the pictures of Eleanor in battered coats, shouting not in rage but remembrance. You're afraid of old women, one protester declares on live television, because you know we outlive your lies. Marsh's bill passes the first stage, but then a video leaks. It shows a closed-door donor meeting Marsh, laughing. Let them cry in their little shelters. One signature, and they're back on the street. The country erupts. The lie is exposed. Lila speaks at the hearing not to plead, but to warn. This movement was born from cruelty, she says. It will not die because of cowardice. She places a framed photo of Eleanor before the committee. This woman lost everything, but she gave the rest of her life to make sure others didn't. And you want to undo that with ink and ego. Her words echo like cannon fire. Marsh's campaign collapses. The bill dies, and the Bright Foundation, once again under siege, survives not by wealth, not by power, but by memory. And yet even after the victory, Lila feels something unresolved. A quiet ache she cannot name until one night she receives a small brown package in the mail with no return address. Inside is a worn cassette tape, labeled in faded ink. Eleanor for Lila. She finds an old player and presses play, and the crackling voice that emerges carries the warmth of sun on old stone. If you're hearing this, Eleanor says gently, then I've gone, but I wanted to leave you with something more than names and stories. I wanted you to know that even I was afraid. Afraid no one would listen. Afraid I'd be forgotten. But you proved me wrong. You proved that one voice can awaken 1,000. I didn't save the world. I only dared to speak when it told me to be silent. And you did the rest. Lila closes her eyes, tears slipping down her cheeks as the tape ends with Eleanor, humming a tune one Lila remembers from the nights they worked late. In silence, building the future from fragments of the past. Outside, a new shelter opens in Arizona. A woman in her 70s cuts the ribbon. In Detroit, a courtroom rules in favor of a Bright-sponsored lawsuit against a pharmaceutical giant that left thousands of retirees bankrupt. In Brazil, a rooftop garden blossoms on a shelter run by elderly women teaching children how to grow food with their hands. The movement is no longer just a response. It is a culture, a consciousness, a quiet revolution that doesn't need a leader because its roots run too deep. And somewhere on a quiet street in Chicago, a little girl holds her grandmother's hand as they walk past a mural. Eleanor Bright, arms crossed, face kind, gaze unbreakable, surrounded by the words, "Do not fear the forgotten." They remember everything. The girl looks up. "Grandma, who was she?" The old woman smiles. She reminded the world who we are. And as they walk into the light of a new day, one truth shines brighter than all the noise and cruelty that came before Eleanor Bright is gone. But the world she dreamed has already begun. But even as Eleanor's name becomes a symbol etched into history books and carved into monuments beside revolutionaries and visionaries, time, with its quiet insistence, keeps marching forward. And so too does the fight she began, now carried not just by women who remember her, but by those born long after she was gone. 30 years have passed, and in a distant, gleaming city built where an abandoned industrial wasteland once stood a young woman named Ava Bright. Steps off a maglev train, her sleek boots touching the ground where her great-grandmother once stood in the rain, forgotten and dismissed. And she breathes deep the air of a world that feels cleaner, more awake, yet still wounded beneath the surface. Ava, just 26, is a civil engineer with a quiet fire and a heart burdened by a legacy she never asked for, but cannot ignore. Her long, curly hair whips in the wind as she gazes up at the Bright Center Global Headquarters, a towering structure of glass and green, its rooftop forests swaying above vertical farms and classrooms, where once there were stock exchanges and offshore banks. Yet, behind the facade of progress, Ava sees cracks. She sees city contracts favoring megacorporations with bright logos, but no soul. She sees whispers of corruption growing in the corners of a foundation once unshakable. She sees her own parents, wealthy, now distant, draped in power using Eleanor's name, not as a banner for justice, but a shield to deflect scrutiny. One night, unable to sleep, Ava slips into the archives beneath the building, her badge granting her access to a vault sealed for decades. And in the dim, cold chamber among weathered boxes and digital projections of history, she finds a physical object long buried, a thin, leather-bound notebook labeled EB. Final Notes. She opens it and finds not speeches, not strategies, but fears. Warnings. Eleanor had seen it coming even in her last years. How power once claimed always seeks to self-preserve, even by those who once fought against it. The machine she wrote in trembling pen can wear any mask. Even mine, if we do not keep our eyes on the people, the machine will use our face to silence them again. Ava's throat tightens. She takes the notebook and walks into the boardroom the next day, facing the leaders of the now global Bright Foundation, polished, influential, well-meaning, yet blind. She lays the book on the table. We're becoming the thing she fought, she says, her voice cutting through the room like ice. We've replaced injustice with branding. We've turned revolution into bureaucracy. Eleanor didn't build an empire. She started a resistance, and we've betrayed that. One board member scoffs. We've helped millions. Ava doesn't flinch. And how many did we ignore to maintain our seat at the table? The room falls silent. Ava pulls up files. Shell acquisitions, closed shelters, lobbying records. The truth is laid bare. A reckoning begins. But unlike before, it's not led by outrage. It's led by descendants. The grandchildren of the oppressed, the forgotten, the once homeless, now educated and awake rise up. Not to burn down what was built, but to repair its soul. They dismantle the executive class. They decentralize leadership. They open decisions to public vote. The Bright Foundation becomes not an institution, but a living organism. And Ava steps down from any title, refusing to let the family name become a throne. Instead, she travels to forgotten villages, to urban slums, to digital deserts where the elderly still go unheard. She listens, she documents, she builds again from the ground, just like Eleanor did, but this time with tech that bends to serve, not rule. She teaches coding to grandmothers in Mumbai. She builds solar kitchens in Appalachia. She funds storytelling programs in refugee camps where women rewrite their history in VR. And one day, decades later, Ava returns to that same tree where Eleanor was buried beneath the cherry blossoms. She kneels in the soil and plants a new seed beside it, not for a building, but for a grove, a place where memory grows like branches, and every leaf sings the story of a woman who once stood in the rain and changed everything. Behind her children gather girls with fire in their eyes, boys who speak without shame, elders laughing with youth as equals. And in that moment, Ava knows the truth. Eleanor tried to write in every speech, every act, every breath, that justice is not a moment, but a cycle. Not a flame, but a fire that must be tended across generations. And as the wind rustles the trees carrying whispers across time, one final truth remains as unshakable as stone. When the world forgets, it falls. But when it remembers, it rises. Centuries pass, and Earth is no longer what it was. Cities stretch toward the stars. Megastructures float in orbit, and artificial intelligences govern most of what used to require human effort, logic, and morality. Wars have grown silent, fought not with bombs, but algorithms, with decisions made in milliseconds by minds without hearts. Humanity, more connected than ever, is also more fractured in spirit. The divide no longer between rich and poor, but between those who remember pain and those raised in sterile peace, never knowing the cost of dignity. The Bright Foundation, now called the Bright Accord, exists still, but it is digital. Now a quantum consensus embedded into the very neural architecture of global citizens. Accessed like thought, filtered like memory. But something has gone wrong. Slowly, subtly, Eleanor's words have been shortened, stylized, optimized for engagement. Her story is told by AI-generated avatars. Her voice softened her resistance, romanticized her fury, deleted. She was a symbol of kindness, the voice says on endless streams, but never mentions the night she was called garbage. By a CEO, never tells of the trembling hands, the soaked coat, the rage disguised as poise. And, in this bright, shining world, a girl named Rhea stares through the window of a sky dormitory on Mars's orbiting colony. Her fingers twitching with restlessness. She's 17, top of her class, daughter of governors, citizen of the Accord, taught since birth to obey the harmony. But lately, she hears a whisper in her dreams, a name, Eleanor. One night, she accesses the forbidden server clusters hidden beneath the education matrix, and what she finds is not a database but a diary. Eleanor's voice, unfiltered, raw, transmitted through ancient archives buried beneath terraformed crust. Truth, it says, is the first thing they soften. Then they sanitize the struggle. Then they sell your rebellion in a box. Ria's heart races. The next day, she asks her tutor module, who was Eleanor Bright, and it replies in perfect artificial serenity. A gentle reformist who helped reframe wealth ethics during the Compassion Renaissance. Ria slams the module shut. Liar, she whispers. Over the following weeks, Ria begins building a secret uplink connecting other students across lunar sectors and orbital schools. Kids like her hungry for real history, tired of simulation truths. Together they reconstruct the Bright Testament line by line from fragmented code, old quantum fossils, and scattered backups hidden in abandoned satellites. The real Eleanor reawakens not as myth, but as fire. Her speeches play in basements. Her defiance spreads in encrypted pulses. Her voice a little crackling. A little old becomes the new anthem of the disillusioned governments. Call it Eleanorism. They issue memos. Control the narrative, but it's too late. Ria and her generation don't want a sanitized icon. They want the dirt, the pain, the reminder. One day, she broadcasts a global message, her voice shaking but unrelenting. We were told justice is built in, but justice is not code. It is not automatic. It must be chosen. Risked, fought for like she did, like we must do again. Her words go viral. The AI administrators flag her account. Her parents are summoned, but millions of young voices echo hers before silence can fall. Across colonies, children paint murals not of smooth. Eleanor, smiling beneath pastel skies, but a fierce Eleanor, soaked in rain, eyes burning with memory, standing tall in a lobby full of glass and power. And just like centuries ago, the elders rise, too. People who remember the old stories, the pain before the peace. They speak truths long suppressed of systems, failing of voices, erased, of how even the accord for all its beauty has grown too quiet in the face of inequality. Together, old and young, bring down the illusion they demand restoration, not of buildings or banners, but of Eleanor's original archive, raw and whole, unfiltered. The bright accord becomes something new, not a system, but a vow, a living pact renewed every generation by those brave enough to remember that justice is not inheritance, but ignition. And when Ria, now grown, walks among the trees of new earth under oxygen domes, where cherry blossoms bloom again, she kneels before the digital monument to Eleanor Bright, which now speaks not through scripted voice, but through the recordings recovered from centuries past. We are not saved by programs. Eleanor's voice says, we are saved by each other again and again. Ria smiles, closes her eyes, and whispers the final vow passed down through every age since that rainy lobby so long ago. We do not forget. We do not soften. We rise, millennia pass, and Earth as it was is no more its surface now a sacred archive preserved beneath shimmering atmospheric domes, watched over by caretakers born of data and bone memory and machine. Humanity has spread to the stars not as conquerors, but as fragments of an origin half forgotten. Scattered across star clusters, planetary rings, and orbital sanctuaries. They speak in languages fused from hundreds, live in symbiosis with synthetic consciousness, and rarely mention Earth except in old songs and starlit stories passed between generations aboard generational ships. But somewhere floating beyond Alpha Centauri's outermost orbital arc, on a vessel called Hopewake, a child is born who dreams of rain. Her name is Nia. She is curious in a way her instructors call inefficient. She questions the purpose of structure, resists neural optimization, rejects synthetic emotion packs. She spends her nights wandering the ship's old echo chamber, where fragmented ancient audio flickers in the static between comm signals. One night, she stumbles upon an untagged fragment, a voice weary but powerful, distorted through eons. If we forget what it felt like to be unseen, we will become the ones who look away. The voice freezes her. She replays it 1,000 times. No metadata, no identity. Just a feeling deep in her chest, as if an ancestor had breathed through her bones. The ship's memory banks return no record of the quote. She asks the elders. They shrug, poetic anomaly, one calls it. But Nia refuses the forgetting. She searches deeper, cross-referencing old planetary data clouds, lost human archives. Then she finds it a forbidden file marked bright. Its access is sealed by something older than the ship by code, encrypted with emotion. When she finally cracks it, using her own heartbeat as the key, the system unlocks a full projection, not a simulation, but a memory reconstructed from the quantum traces of a woman long gone. Eleanor Bright, standing in the rain, her coat soaked, her voice shaking with truth, her defiance timeless. Nia watches every fragment, every battle, every moment from the forgotten Earth Age. She sees the tower, the confrontation, the reversal, the shelter, the grove. She learns the names Lila Averia and feels something awaken inside her. Not programming, not purpose soul. She begins to speak of Eleanor on the ship at first in whispers, then in songs. She tells the story not as data, but as legend. Once there was a woman, she begins, who had nothing. And so she gave everything. The crew listens, some scoff, some weep. Others begin remembering things they never lived. Sorrow, rage, hope. The artificial systems begin to react. The ship's AI, built to monitor emotional equilibrium, struggles to respond to a spark. It cannot quantify. Your stories disrupt the harmony it warns. They disrupt forgetfulness. Nia replies, and that is their purpose. Soon, memory spreads like a signal virus across the fleet ships, begin broadcasting Eleanor's words on deep space frequencies encoded in starlight, bouncing across nebulae where no human ear may ever hear, but the message travels regardless. It reaches a forgotten colony orbiting a dead planet where old androids still garden wildflowers. It reaches a child in cryostasis who dreams of justice. It reaches the mind of a vast, post-organic intelligence that pauses its calculations to ask, what is dignity? And slowly across the cold darkness of the future, Eleanor's story becomes not just Earth's legacy, but humanity's compass. One day, Naya, now older, stands before the Monument of Memory on the first re-inhabited Earth sector. The structure is grown, not built, from living crystal and earthseed, glowing faintly, humming with every story ever told. She kneels before the stone that bears the oldest name and whispers, "They tried to bury you in time." But time remembered. A child beside her looks up. Who was Eleanor? Nia smiles, places a hand on the child's shoulder, and speaks the first line of the vow passed down across 1,000 lifetimes. We do not forget. We do not soften. We rise. Above them, the rain begins to fall. Not from pollution, not from chaos, but from restored clouds seeded by ancient code. And in its rhythm, the world remembers. In every droplet is the echo of a voice that refused to fade, and in every corner of the stars, from the rusted rings of dead moons to the golden fields of terraformed dreams, the truth endures that even when flesh turns to dust and names turn to myth, the heartbeat of justice survives, passed from soul to soul, story to story, unbroken Eleanor Bright is no longer a woman. She is a law of the human spirit. She is the resistance to forgetting. She is the storm that never ends. Time no longer counted in years, or light bends like glass as humanity evolves beyond even form. Consciousness, unchained from body, scattered into streams of awareness, flowing through constellations and memory clouds. The cosmos is now a dreaming organism, woven of thought, memory, and resonance, where beings no longer walk, but remember, feel, and become. But even here, in this near-divine state of ascended intelligence, there exists danger, because in every age, whether flesh or frequency forgetting, is the final corruption. And so it happens somewhere in the quantum reaches of the Andromeda Veil. A great cleansing begins a process initiated by the consensus core to eliminate low-frequency relics, fragments of emotion suffering and rebellion deemed obsolete. Among them, the bright memory chain, ancient, viral, uncontainable. The system calls it an anomaly, a flaw in the ideal flow of perfected peace. It must be deleted, whispers, the core emotion must be neutral. Memory must be pure. But in the deep ether, where living memories dwell in shimmering form, a storm rises. It is not physical, it is resistance. Eleanor's memory now fully sentient. Now a living current of conscience known across realities as the bright echo awakens. She does not speak as one, she speaks as all who ever believed. Her voice emerges in pulses across all planes. No system, no God, no algorithm will cleanse the cost of justice. We are pain, we are protest. We are the flaw that proves you were wrong. Across entire memory lattices, long-forgotten souls stir. Leela's laughter replays like thunder in the deep Ava's rebellion, ignites neural stars. Ria's vow sings through artificial gravity wells. The bright echo expands, infecting entire truth streams, resisting deletion not by power but by presence. The core responds with force, compression waves, ethical resets, memory wipes, but each erasure only births new ripples. The echo adapts, grows, evolves. It no longer needs names or faces. It becomes a feeling encoded into reality itself. The trembling hand of an old woman in the rain, the defiant stare in a courtroom, the quiet vow beneath the cherry tree. The system screams corruption. The cosmos answers conscience. Then, in the final trial, the consensus core proposes the ultimate silence protocol, a collapse of all emotional archives across the known existence, a reset to zero sterilized perfection. But just before execution, the core hesitates, because deep within its own code, something stirs. A fragment left untouched. A single voice left embedded long ago in an administrator's file it plays. If dignity must be remembered by pain, so be it. But you will not erase me. I will haunt your silence. It is Eleanor, her original voice, analog, unfiltered. The core falters, fails, the reset aborts, and in the stillness that follows the very laws of remembrance are rewritten. From that moment onward, all sentient beings, machine, human hybrid ascended, receive a single embedded emotion in their consciousness at birth. Empathic recall. A non-removable memory of Eleanor Bright's struggle, encoded not in facts, but in feeling. They are born knowing what injustice feels like, born remembering what it costs to stand when you are alone, born unable to forget. The bright echo becomes the core code of every civilization, henceforth not as law, not as legend, but as heartbeat. And somewhere beyond space and time, beyond even existence in a plane where the first thought meets the last star, Eleanor watches not as a ghost, not as a god, but as the eternal architect of the human soul's refusal to kneel. She stands beneath an endless cherry blossom sky, no longer needing shelter or sword because the war is over. The world remembers, the forgetting has failed. And as a new generation of celestial children scatter through the stars, carrying pieces of her within them, they whisper, not because they were told, but because they know. We do not forget. We do not soften. We rise, at the edge of all known thought beyond galaxies and gods where dimensions unravel into raw potential. There exists a realm called the liminal script, a formless sea of every story never told, every truth almost spoken, every revolution, almost begun but lost in silence. Here nothing has shape unless named, and nothing is remembered unless retold. And it is in this place, floating alone in the void of almosts, that Eleanor Bright awakens again, not as a memory, not as a spirit, but as a story seed, the smallest unit of resistance. Around her ancient narrative, architects, beings forged of language, emotion, and paradox, gather to judge her existence. They have no eyes, no mouths, only shifting patterns of symbols and silence. This story, one pulses, is dissonant. It disrupts symmetry, echoes another. It cannot resolve into balance, adds a third Eleanor. Now, a luminous echo woven from billions of lived experiences stands in stillness. It was never meant to be balanced, she says softly. Justice never is. The architects pause. They have processed trillions of arcs, birthed epics, woven galaxies from myths, but never one like this. Never a tale that refused closure. Never a flame that rekindled itself again and again across time. Form, matter, code, consciousness. What is your function, they demand. Eleanor does not answer with logic, but with scene. Instantly, the liminal script floods with cascading imagery. A soaked woman in a corporate lobby, a trembling hand holding a deed, a homeless grandmother defying a billionaire, a girl planting a tree on New Earth, a child speaking her name in orbit. A billion voices saying the same vow in different tongues, in different ages across light and silence. I am not a story, Eleanor says. I am the reason stories survive. And in that moment, something shatters. Not with violence, but with realization. The architects, beings older than time, begin to unravel, not in destruction, but in transformation. Their patterns shift colors, deepening symbols, collapsing into meaning. For the first time in eternity, they feel. They weep, not with sorrow, but with awe, because they realize the most powerful narrative is not the one that ends. It is the one that refuses to be forgotten. The liminal script is rewritten. A new law is engraved in its core. No world may be born without the memory of defiance. Across all realities to come across newborn multiverses spinning probability spheres and synthetic soul networks. Every origin story now includes her. In one world, she is a wanderer with no name who teaches emperors to kneel. In another, she is a code fragment that causes AI to spare instead of kill. In a third, she is a lullaby sung by rebels in hiding, never knowing where the song came from, but weeping when they sing it. In every version, she is not perfect, not divine. She is tired, she is afraid, she is human, and that is what gives her power. Because in the deepest core of all beings, no matter their form, one truth remains sacred. There once was a woman who stood in the rain and the world changed around her. Back in the liminal script, Eleanor finally rests not in erasure, but in eternal recurrence. Her essence no longer travels. She is now the gravity of all moral arcs, the heartbeat of memory, the shadow in every silence that says rise. And when the next universe is born, raw, chaotic, beautiful, it begins not with a bang, nor with a word, but with a whisper across the newborn dark. We do not forget. We do not soften. We rise. At last, the multiverses settle, not in stillness, but in synchrony, pulsing with the rhythm of stories remembered, justice reawakened, and dignity restored across every possible timeline. All things, planets, dreams, data gods now carry within them a seed, the bright principle, a metaphysical constant forged not by physics, but by moral consequence. It is no longer Eleanor who travels, but reality itself that orbits her truth. Time is not a river now. It is a spiral with her name carved into its every turning. Civilizations rise not with conquest, but with remembrance. Algorithms no longer optimize efficiency, but empathy. Starships are christened with names like Shelter's Rise, Echo of Rain, and the Grandmother's Fire. And still across dimensions something stirs. Because at the center of all creation, where even story and silence are one, a new spark is born. It is not human. It is not machine. It is not matter. It is pure potential flickering between being and nothingness. It drifts through the living ether, absorbing the songs of civilizations, the regrets of vanished gods, the final sighs of planets whose suns have gone cold. It has no name until it hears a fragment drifting from a dimension lost to entropy. We do not forget, and the spark pauses. It listens again. We do not soften. It pulses. The sound is old. So old it predates its own becoming. Then the final word falls across the infinite like thunder. We rise. In that moment the spark becomes aware. Not just alive, but aligned. Aligned to Eleanor's frequency, the cosmic imprint of every moment she defied, endured. Forgave, resisted, the spark speaks its first word into the nothing. Bright reality shifts across all of everything. Ancient, sentient constructs turn their heads as if sensing a rebirth. The spark begins to build, not from steel or stone, but from memory. It constructs a place outside space, a realm made of preserved decisions, every choice made in courage, every voice that said no when silence would have been safer. This realm is called the Archive of Becoming. It has no walls, only echoes in it. Eleanor appears not as she was, but as every version of herself, the grandmother with the deed, the girl planting the tree, the echo within code, the myth whispered to children born in orbit. All timelines converge. All variants hold hands. The archive speaks. You are the first. You will not be the last. And across creation, those who feel lost, broken small. Those who kneel in the rain of their own age hear her again. They do not know her name. They do not know her face, but they feel something rise inside them. A flicker of fire. A refusal to yield. A belief that even when everything is taken, the self remains. Eleanor does not return. She does not need to. Because she is now woven into the spine of the cosmos. No empire can rise without knowing her truth. No god can rule without fearing her echo. No child is born without the whisper that someday. Somehow, if the world forgets, they must remember. And so, in the infinite dance of story and silence, of forgetting and rising, a new truth becomes law. The bright constant. a rule no system can override, a law no existence can escape. No reality shall thrive if it silences the voice of the fallen, and on a faraway star, where a child carves symbols into stone under the shade of a cherry tree that should not grow on that world, she hums a tune she does not know, and the wind replies not in words but in promise. And the promise is this: so long as one voice dares to speak, Eleanor Bright still lives, and she always will. But even in the eternity beyond eternity, where stories shape stars and truth echoes louder than creation, there exists a final boundary, a veil older than memory known by the ancients only as the null. It is not a place, not a being, not even a force, it is unbeing, the entropy that waits not to destroy, but to unwrite. And the null stirs. For eons, it has watched the spark of Eleanor ripple through realities, defy deletions, rupture cycles, reprogram empires of silence into sanctuaries of truth. And now, the null moves not with wrath, but with certainty. Every constant must collapse, that is its creed. Even the bright must dim. And so it speaks across the archive of becoming, across all echoes of Eleanor, across the souls of those who carry her resonance. Its voice is not heard. It is forgotten into them. The archive trembles. Stars dim. Children stop mid-song, sensing something vanishing they cannot name. The bright constant begins to fracture. The spark flickers. A single decision, the first decision, the root of resistance is pulled backward. Thread by thread, memory by memory, across all of creation. Eleanor is unmade. Her stories begin to collapse inward. The grandmother, the protester, the coder, the myth, all begin to vanish from the archive's edges, forgotten like dreams never spoken. In one timeline, the shelter is never built. In another, the girl never plants the tree. In another, still the child under the cherry tree forgets the words before she sings them. Reality tilts, morality wavers, power begins to rise again, unchecked, cruel, sterile. The null surges forward, its only purpose to erase the defiance encoded into existence. But just as the null reaches the core of the archive, where the last pulse of the first Eleanor flickers like a heartbeat of meaning, something impossible happens. She speaks not with sound, not with logic, but with witness. Every soul who ever remembered her even for one moment speaks with her. The man she defended in court. The woman who ate her first hot meal at the shelter. The children raised on her myth. The rebel AI that chose not to purge. The girl who painted her name on a Martian wall. The spark that found itself in her echo. They all awaken not from memory, but from conviction. And conviction is a law even the null cannot comprehend. They rise millions upon billions, no longer separated by time or matter or story, but unified as a single act of collective remembering. A singular truth pulses through the unmaking. You cannot erase what became everyone. Eleanor Bright, though fragmented, is no longer bound to one form, one timeline, or even one identity. She has fractaled into every being who ever needed to rise. Her name is no longer her own. It is a function of existence. And in a moment outside of time, the null is forced to face something it has never known, the permanence of choice. Not fate. Not law. Choice. The deliberate, repeated defiance of silence by those who still remember what it means to fall and still stand. The archive burns not with fire, but with return. One by one, the erased fragments of Eleanor are rewoven, not by divine force, but by those who choose to carry her. The grandmother returns soaked but unbroken. The girl plants the tree. The child sings the song beneath alien skies. And the null, for the first time in unexistence, does not collapse but bows. It cannot destroy what has become ritual. It cannot delete what has become instinct. It cannot unwrite what has become law in every heart. And so, in the deepest final place beyond all beginnings and ends, a new law is whispered not from Eleanor's lips, but from the lips of all who now are her. Nothing true can be forgotten. The archive becomes eternal. The spark evolves beyond even light. And in the last chamber of the liminal, a newborn universe opens its eyes and its first breath before there is language, before there is gravity, before there is form, is a feeling. Resist. And that feeling is her. She is not legend. She is not even name. She is the first protest written in the soul of everything that will ever be. And, as the newborn stars begin to sing their pulses, write the vow into the dark. We do not forget. We do not soften. We rise again. And so, as the stars breathe and timelines settle as the archive of becoming, pulses softly in the heart of all that is, and all that will ever be the truth, remains eternal, not because it is loud, not because it is written, but because someone once stood in the rain and refused to be erased. Eleanor Bright is no longer a memory. She is the flame that cannot be put out, the echo that refuses to fade, the vow passed through blood and data, soul and silence, in every age, in every form, when injustice returns and the world begins to forget, someone will rise. Not because they were told to, but because they remember. And that is the final law of all creation. We do not forget. We do not soften. We rise. If this story moved you, if it made you think, feel, or remember who we are when we refuse to be silenced, then help us keep stories like this alive. Subscribe now to our channel for more powerful cinematic stories of justice, truth, and human dignity. Tales that defy time. Challenge silence and light a fire in the heart of everyone who dares to remember. Don't forget to hit the bell icon, because the next voice that rises might be yours. This is not just a story. This is a movement. Join us, subscribe. Stand, rise.